So we did talk about brecht a couple of weeks ago. I did say to you before we did the workshop sessions, I did talk to you about brecht and the fact that most of his stuff was done in pre-war Germany in the 30s, and that he had to escape Germany because of the persecution of anybody of artistic talent by the Nazi Party during the build-up to World War II. Right, so the background to Brecht, and probably what you need to know, is that he was a Marxist. He believed in Karl Marx and the theories that Karl Marx espoused. So he was a great lover of communism. Not so much of a great lover of communism that he wanted to be a communist, but just that he really liked the ideas that Karl Marx came up with as to how society should operate. Now, without going too deeply into those, because you either may or may not have done them in school, they're not wholly relevant for this. Suffice to say that Karl Marx believed one thing and Western society believed something completely different. All right? And that's the way the world is. All right, so Brechtian techniques. The theatrical conventions developed by Brecht are surrounded by much confusion. All right? And the reason for that is purely and simply because the techniques that he's come up with, the ideas that he puts forward, are difficult for people to grasp in terms of from an actor's point of view and from an audience's point of view. And you saw that last week when you guys were doing your own workshops and trying to do some epic theatre stuff and trying to exaggerate and all that sort of stuff. That was difficult for people. Sometimes you saw performances that weren't exaggerated, where the stuff wasn't quite there. And that's purely simply because it is a difficult thing to do. Okay, so although he wrote extensively on dramatic theory behind his work, some aspects are still vague. To understand it, we must evaluate theatrical conventions and how they relate to both his writings and productions, whilst keeping in mind that Brecht's techniques were a byproduct of his environment. His theatre is best described as a dramatic vessel of rational didactism. Didactism is simply the teaching of a moral lesson. Okay, so that's it. You don't have to get too sort of cowed up about terminology, but didactism is the teaching of a moral lesson. Remembering that all of Brechtian theatre was about teaching a lesson. It wasn't about being dramatic and taking the audience away and creating this belief in what was happening on stage. It was all about just teaching that lesson. So, and it was influenced by his Marxist beliefs. In order to incorporate Marxist theory in his works, Brecht devised various dramatic techniques to convey this message. Techniques such as the alienation effect, didactism, breaking the fourth wall, gestus, narration, use of song, all encompass the Brechtian theorisation of epic theatre, a convention first founded by Urban Piscator. He's not important. Okay, epic theatre. Right, we're going to get into that. Epic theatre is a term used generally to describe Brecht's theory and technique. His plays were epic in that dramatic action was episodic, a disconnected montage of scenes. And we said that to you last week. It doesn't follow cause and effect as a normal play does. Each scene is its own little play, its own little bit of narrative. Okay? All elements contribute to Brecht's overall purpose, which was to comment on the political, social, and economic elements that affected the lives of his characters. This is really important, because at the end of the day, that's what his theory was about. It was about instruction. It was about telling people about, what was going on and giving people, examples of how people live their lives that would cause the audience to go, oh, well, that's not fair, that's not right. They'd ask questions. That's what it was all about. In Brecht or theatre, he outlines the differences between epic and dramatic theatre as follows. I'm going to go through these for you and just kind of make sure you have a clear understanding. So, dramatic theatre is all about plot, and we talked about that. It's all about cause and effect and so forth. So one scene follows on to the next scene, follows on to the next scene, and that's how it rolls. Whereas epic theatre is all about narrative, which means that every scene is its own little piece, its own little story. All right, so that's important to understand. In dramatic theatre, it implicates the spectator in the stage situation. So, really, quite simply, if there's, our whole point of dramatic theatre is to really kind of involve the audience in kind of an emotional way. So, if somebody's heartbroken and tragically torn apart on stage by something that's occurred, we want the audience to feel that. So, the more believable we make that, the more the audience believes that, and so forth. Whereas in epic theatre, we turn that spectator into an observer. If we remove all that emotion, if we take all that stuff out, then there's nothing for the audience to be carried away with. So they become an observer instead of having this kind of this whole sort of feeling, this outpouring of feeling towards whatever's going on stage. They get rid of all that and they sit back and they just observe what's happening. And that's a big difference in terms of performance. Okay, so in dramatic theatre, we wear down his capacity of action. What that basically means is we really do wear down the audience's desire to do anything, because they sit there and hopefully by the time they come out of a play, it's like when you come out of a sad movie, like a Notebook or something like that, you feel kind of like, oh, you just want to go and have a cup of coffee, you know, or have a chat or go and have something. You don't really want to sort of do much else because it was a sad movie and people get really caught up in sad movies. You know, some people sit there and watch a movie at home with a box of tissues and they'll cry through a movie, you know, and that's fine because that's what the movie's designed to be. So you basically, by the end of that movie, you feel kind of pretty much drawn out. Whereas epic theatre, there is none of that, okay? In epic theatre, we arouse passive action because we actually don't have any of that going on stage. The audience isn't sitting there being carried away by something. They're sitting there and they're sort of like analysing what's going on. So the idea is that they walk out of the theatre, instead of feeling like having a cup of coffee, they've got to feel the other way. They've got to feel like actually doing something about whatever it is that they saw on stage, whatever message was being conveyed, whatever lesson was being taught. They actually feel like they should do something about it. And don't forget, because the lessons are either social, political, or economic, they directly were relevant to what was happening in people's lives at that particular time. To crystallise this for a little bit for you, think about if you go and watch a play about bullying and you're a person who gets bullied a lot, for example, right? Or a person who sees bullying and wants to do something about it. You go and watch that play and it's a good play and it's real and it sort of like, you know, comes up with some really good points and really sort of says this is what you could do about it. You know, if you come out of that and think, yeah, I'm actually going to do something, then the play has done its job, right? It's been a moral lesson. It's taught you some lessons. That's what it's all been about, right? So that's what brecht's theatre was about. It was all about getting that happening. It provides him with sensations. That's what dramatic theatre is supposed to do. It's supposed to make you feel things. Whereas it forces him to take decisions. Epic theatre makes you take decisions. It says, yes, I'm actually going to do something about this. As opposed to, oh, isn't that just wonderful? Actually makes people feel they should do something. In dramatic theatre, it's all about experience. Okay? People go, oh, you know, you watch something on stage, and you go, oh, yeah, you know, that's right. You know, you can feel sort of something there. You might have happened to you, or you might have known something that's happened to, or somebody that has happened to, whatever's going on stage. Whereas epic theatre isn't about that. It's not about that experience. It's about creating a picture of the world, and it's usually the world that people live in. All right, so they can sort of go, oh, this is what's wrong with my world. All right, and they can take decisions accordingly. In dramatic theatre, the spectator is involved in something. All right, so we involve the spectator. We get them to laugh. We get them to cry. We get them to be, you know, to feel someone's anger. We get them to sort of like move with the performance. Whereas in epic theatre, it's made to face something. All right, that's what it's all about. You know, like we're going to face the cold hard reality of this is what's happening in your society today, and you should do something about that. All right, so that's what that is about. In dramatic theatre, we make suggestion. Okay, there's suggestion, and whereas in epic theatre, it's all about the argument. All right, and what we mean by argument is everybody knows when there's an issue put forward, an issue has its basis in argument. All right, so that's what that's about. If you don't understand this, you just need to say, ask me a question, all right? I'm trying to make this as simple as I can. You can see it's all revolving around the same idea here, all right? But if you don't get it, just say, hey, I don't really get that, and I'll sort that out. Okay, so, epic theatre, in dramatic theatre, instinctive feelings are preserved. So the way we feel is not sort of questioned, okay? If you feel, you know, if you're watching something and you feel sad about that, okay, fair enough. You know, that's a preserved feeling. You know, no one's going to tell you that you can't feel sad about that. All right? Whatever you see on stage, there's no reason for you not to feel sad about that. So your feeling at that time is preserved. You can hold on to that. Whereas in epic theatre, it's brought to a point of recognition. Okay, so how you feel about something is actually brought forward. So it's not just contained within you, it's out there. You should feel outraged, or you should feel this, or you should feel that, but you should feel something that makes you want to do something about it. In dramatic theatre, the spectator's in the thick of it and shares the experience. That's what it's all about. Whereas a spectator in epic theatre stands outside and studies. All right, because we don't have that emotional outpouring on stage that you have in dramatic theatre, the spectator can actually stand outside and sort of like be a bit of a spectator on this and sort of go, oh yeah, and make decisions. The human being is taken for granted in dramatic theatre, all right, whereas in epic theatre, the human being is the object of inquiry. What does that basically means is that when you take something for granted, the way people behave, you know, we take that for granted. We say, okay, if there's a play on stage, for example, and a husband abandons his wife on stage, and she feels a certain way. Okay, we take that for granted. We say, yes, that's obviously how she's going to feel. Right? We don't sit there going, well, that's unusual for her to feel abandoned by the man because he's walked out and slammed the door in her face. We actually feel like, yeah, that's fine. You know, she should feel like that. We take that for granted because that's an accepted emotion. Whereas in epic theatre, human being is the object of the inquiry. So instead, we would sort of turn around and say, well, why actually did he walk out that door? What has she done? How can she be like that? Right? So it's the other way around. So on one thing, we sit there and we kind of feel like that's what should occur. And the other type of theatre, we go, well, no, hang on a sec. It's not quite right. She shouldn't have said those sorts of things. This is what's happening in society today, and so forth. You see where this is all moving? Yep. Okay, good. In dramatic theatre, here's alterable, so the audience is unalterable. So we're not trying to change the audience at all in dramatic theatre. We're not trying to make them feel anything different. The person walks in, they are pretty much the same person when they walk out. Okay, we don't expect anything more from a spectator. They're not alterable. We don't change the person. Whereas in epic theatre, obviously, we believe they are alterable and they can change. They are able to alter, which means they can change their point of view. So if you walk into an epic theatre piece, you should be able to walk it, and it presents something which is confronting to you, right? And makes you sit there and think about it. If you see the point of view, see the other point of view, you should be able to walk out of there and go, yeah, actually, I've changed my mind on that. I do agree. Yes, that's wrong. That's what epic theatre is all about. It's about giving that sort of like producing that kind of capacity for thought and actually that capacity for analysis, and actually sit there and say, yeah, I can change my mind. Yes, I don't agree with that, and so forth. In dramatic piece, obviously the spectator has their eyes on the finish, so we want to know what happens at the end. It's like reading a good book. You read a good fictional novel, you want to know what happens at the end. Okay, nobody really reads a book halfway through and go, yeah, I don't really care what happens at the end. If it's a good book, most people want to know exactly what happens. All right, that's it. Whereas in an epic piece, we have your eyes on the actual course, on what course we're going to take. We're not interested in what happens at the end. We're interested in what changes, what things we can make, what effects we can have on lives of others and so forth. So that's the big difference between them. Obviously we said one scene follows takes another in dramatic, that's fine, and each scene is itself. We talked about that. One is about growth, so anybody in a play will grow. We talk about what a character's objective is in dramatic theatre, and it's in your character development sheets. The character objective is what that person's going to achieve by the end of the play. It doesn't really mean that in epic theatre. We don't really have character objectives in epic theatre because there's no narrative there in terms of a plot. We don't expect the character to be one way at the beginning and be one way at the end. These characters in epic theatre exist to instruct, so they don't usually change. So they don't really have an objective beyond living their lives as to however they see fit. One is linear development, one's in curves. One has, now this will always cause people problem. Evolution. One in dramatic theatre is all about evolutionary determinism. Right? Now that's always a big pill for people to swallow. When we say that life is determined, right? There's a few different ways that people look at life. Some people say that life is determined. Some people that say that life is free will. Some people say that life is fated. When you say that life is free will, it means that you can walk out a door and you can choose which way you're going to go, whether you're going to turn and go left, or whether you're going to walk out the door and turn right, or whether you're going to go straight ahead. You make that decision. That's what's called free will. Or you make the decision whether you're going to pick that $20 bill up or you're going to walk past it. Most people pick it up. Right? You make these decisions. It's called choice. It's called free will. Determinism is where you go, no, you were always going to walk out that door and go left. And yes, you were always going to walk out that door and turn right. And yes, you were always going to pick up that $20 bill. That means that everything you do has been predetermined. Right? And that's where people start talking about fate. They start saying, well, this person was always going to die at this point, or this was going to happen, or this was always going to happen to you, or you were going to get on that plane that was going to crash, and nothing you could do about it was going to change that. You were still going to end up on the plane and you were going to crash. Right? So that's the kind of like taking philosophy, that big concepts, but taking them and screwing them into a tiny little nutshell. That's what basically it's about. So when we talk about evolutionary determinism, we say, well, in a dramatic theatre piece, it's kind of obvious the way a person's going to react. So, for example, if a husband slams the door on a wife and abandons her and she starts crying, we expect that to happen, depending on what's going on in the play. But we expect that reaction. It's determined, right? Otherwise, actors would be doing whatever they want to do on stage. They'd be doing whatever reactions they see fit. If if a woman's upset at her husband leaving, slams the door and she starts laughing, going, well, isn't that great? Then we'd be going, well, that's not really, that doesn't follow. Right? So we expect certain things. That's what evolutionary determinant is, because all through our lives, we've come to expect a certain kind of reaction. We've come to expect a certain kind of outcome to whatever it is, whether it be two people breaking up and what happens to one person, what happens to the other, based on whatever's going on in their lives. We would expect that. We expect certain things to happen. Whereas in epic theatre, everything jumps around. There is no obvious thing going to happen. There is no determined way of things happening, because we're trying to teach a lesson. When we're trying to teach a lesson, everything's up for grabs. No one's going to behave the way you expect them to behave. That's just the way life is. Okay. Then obviously in dramatic theatre we have man as a fixed point. It's pretty obvious, you know, that's going to happen. That's a fixed point. We know that, right? Nothing's going to change in that person. Whereas in a dramatic thing, man is part of the process. All right. So any characters are on stage, they're not really there. They're quite changeable. Anything could happen. They are there to sort of just purely as instruction, and so they are part of that process of teaching a lesson to the audience, or whatever that might be. Thought determines being. Okay, so when they say that dramatic theatre thought determines being, they really sort of, you know, think, well, a person is going to think a certain way, and that's why they're going to behave a certain way, and that's who they are, you know, and that's fine, and that goes along with everything we've been saying. Whereas social being determines thought, and there's a completely different way of thinking at it. You walk into a dramatic theatre, and you know that the thoughts that a person has, right, that are the thoughts that, you know, makes them who they are. Okay, we know that. That's why a character acts the way they do. If a guy has nasty thoughts on stage, then we know that those nasty thoughts are going to come out and affect all the characters around him. All right? That's cool. These are obvious things. This is not confusing. Whereas in an epic theatre, because we're trying to teach a lesson, right, it's all about what's going on around a person that affects that person and turns them into whoever they're going to turn into. All right? And that's the problem here for epic theatre, is that, you know, it's that whole, well, how does society actually influence people? And that's what epic theatre was all about. One's about feeling, one's about reason. Well, that should be pretty obvious since we're dealing with emotions and stuff. That's all about feelings. And then on the other side, we're dealing with people's brains and the way they think about things, so that's all about reasoning. So they're the essential differences between epic theatre and dramatic theatre. Sorry to go on, but, you know, we've got to get through this. So they're the essential differences. All right, now if we look at, now these are the particular techniques, and these techniques you guys have actually done, all of them bar one, okay? The alienation technique was developed by Brecht, okay? We're just going to close this door because that's a bit loud. Okay, so the alienation technique was developed by Brecht in the 20s and 30s. It is a technique which estranges the audience and forces them to question the social realities of the situation being presented in the play. All right, so we did that. Last week we said to you guys, oh, let's remove the emotions from the play. So we alienated the emotion. That's what we did. We estranged the audience from the emotion. When we say we estrange an audience, it's a big word, but most of you will come across it hopefully at some stage. It means we actually we take them away from what they know. All right, in Brechtian theatre, that's what they do. He takes the audience away from what they know. Your audiences walk in, for example, Rome Sweet Rome, they walk in and they come in to laugh. They come in to laugh, they know it's a funny play, we told them it's a funny play. If they came in to laugh and do all that sort of stuff, and we actually took that away from them, we removed that, and they weren't able to laugh, and they weren't able to be involved, and all that sort of stuff, then we estrange that feeling, we estrange the audience. We make the situation strange for them. All right? Okay? Because if you don't get what you expect, then there you go. Brecht achieved this by the illusion created by conventional plays at the time. He believed that the suspension of disbelief created by realistic drama. What they mean by suspension of disbelief is really quite obvious. If you're doing a play set in the 20s, we're doing a dramatic piece, everybody's in full costume and full set and all the rest of it, and we're really emotional, we're doing the 20s and all this sort of stuff. Even though it's 2012, when the audience walks in the door, if we've done our job properly, they will suspend their disbelief that they're not living in the 20s. They'll come in here and they'll actually believe what they see on stage is an accurate portrayal of the 20s. That's what they do. That's what we if you're good enough, that's what the audience does, it believes. So by suspending their disbelief at the door, they agree to believe what's going on stage. All right? It's not that complicated. Okay? That's why it's called suspension of disbelief. Right? Created by a realistic drama, was a shallow spectacle. He didn't like it. He thought it was shallow and it was manipulative and had heightened emotion. He didn't like any of that. Right? This theatre is a form of escapism and did not challenge the audience at all. Rather than feel a deep connection to the characters, Brecht believed that an emotional distance should be maintained. Right? He obviously wanted to teach people a lesson. He actually wanted to do that. He wanted to use theatre to be instructive. So all this dramatic stuff was just like terrible. He thought it was a horrible thing to do. You can't do that to an audience. It's a waste of everyone's time. What a boring guy. It is only when it happens that the audience can effectively critique and evaluate the struggle between the characters and understands the social realities of the narrative. That's what he wants them to do. He wants them to understand what's going on. This is evident in Mother Courage and Her Children. Now, Mother Courage, for those of you, this is going to be your text for the exam. Okay, you're not going to need to know the whole text, but we are going to go through the text when I get back. Mother Courage, to put her in a nutshell, is a story about a woman who's a war profiteer. And what she does is she has a wagon, and it's full of goods, food, all sorts of bits and pieces that soldiers would like. So she follows the war around, and people buy off her, and as long as there's a war, she makes money out of it. So she's a war profiteer. Along the way, she has 3 children, and she loses them to the war for various reasons, okay, without going into that. Now, through the entire time that she loses her children, she never shows any real emotion about that. All right, there are various reasons for that, but basically, she just keeps on doing business. So even if her kid is dead and dying on the side of the road, she just keeps on rolling with the business, because the business is what all that struggle is what consumes her life. So that's what Mother Courage is all about. Okay, and that's sort of what you're going to be looking at. Now, this is evident in Mother Courage and Her Children when we see Mother Courage singing a lullaby to her daughter Katrine, and then later paying for her funeral without any emotion. So what we would expect for a mother to lose her daughter is a lot of sadness and so forth, and grief and all that kind of stuff, not just pay for the funeral, get in the wagon and keep on going. All right, which is basically what Mother Courage does. The ambivalence and irony of the characters, particularly Mother Courage, is what is so alienating about the play. So the fact that they behave in such a way is so different to the way people expect people to behave, then that's what's called alienation. We're alienating all that stuff that people know, and we're providing all this other stuff. We find ourselves constantly questioning the role of Mother Courage. What kind of a mother is she? Why is she called Courage? I mean, what a ridiculous thing to say. Why is she called Courage when she abandons her children? How is this courageous? And so forth. So the audience was asked to question all this, right? And that's kind of like a mirror of society when they talk about war profiteering. It was during a time of war. You think about what was happening in Europe at that particular time. He lived through World War I and was about to see World War II, so there was a lot of stuff going on there. So, this was a bit of a picture of what was going on in life, and he used Mother Courage as his kind of like example for that. Now, didactism. Didactism, as we said before, is teaching someone a moral lesson. Okay? Remember the other day you always did play, they had to have a moral lesson? Well, that was didactism. You guys were doing it right then and there. Brecht plays are didactic in that they all serve to teach the audience or send a message about certain aspects of society, politics or economy. They are plays which are designed to educate performers and audience. It seems from Brecht's Marxist beliefs that the plays generally show the bourgeois society negatively and the righteous of Marxist morality. All right. Remember, if a guy likes Marxist life and that whole thing towards communism, remember, communism is all about people being equal. Okay, that's pure communism. That means that nobody's important, everybody's as important as each other. As we can see from what happens in the world, that doesn't really occur. Russia and all the rest of these places are communist. There's obviously those people who are more equal than others because they tend to be quite wealthy, and then you've got the poor people who are obviously not as equal. Whereas in a bourgeois society, which is the one you live in, which is a capitalist society where we all enjoy whatever's going on. If you earn a lot of money, good on you. If you don't earn a lot of money, bad luck, but we'll help you as much as we can. Yes, mate? Yes. That's what a bourgeois society is. Nothing wrong with a bourgeois society. We've been living in a bourgeois society for a long, long time. All of you enjoy your bourgeois society. You enjoy your mobile phones. You enjoy going out. You enjoy, your freedom and all that sort of stuff that goes with it. You don't have to toil for society and contribute your wages to a national pool that goes to apparently to everybody, but not really. You know, so you can just live the bourgeois life. He didn't like that. He said that that was wrong, obviously because he was a Marxist, right? And he said it was morally wrong, right? People shouldn't live like that. Where the trouble is, you know, most people like to live like that, so very hard to change an audience when that's what they like. In Mother Courage and her children specifically, the moral lesson didactic lies in the contradictions of the characters and how their choices have affected their lives and the value of it. The idea that Mother Courage is driven by making money and not taking care of her children is shocking to the audience. Whenever her children need her, she's making a business deal. Her actions make the audience question how much is the life really worth, and all that sort of stuff. So when you push that, I mean, you all heard the song "Cats in the Cradle," you know. Yeah. Okay, so you know there you go. That's that whole idea where you know Dad was never there, you know, and son was going to be just like him, and he ended up being just like him. You know, okay, whether it's good, whether it's bad, whether it's ugly, it's all about free will. People make their decisions in life. You live in a bourgeois society, okay, maybe it's not right that you don't see your children enough. Maybe it's not right that you spend all your time making money. But hey, it's your decision, right? It's what you decide to do. Brecht didn't see that as being the right thing to do, and by pushing it out there in such extreme circumstances in Mother Courage and the war and the children dying, so it's not just that you don't see your kids actually die, then he kind of like pushes that message and makes it an extreme message. And obviously then people get really caught up in it because, as people do, you know, people always get caught up in an issue when it's put in their face. You know, for example, whales on the beach. You know, whales on the beach. You've got to take them off the beach. Everybody gets caught up in that. You know, whales being killed, we get caught up in that. All right? It's not right. We get caught up in it, and so forth. Whenever her children, okay, we've done that. What would I change or do? Things, her actions make the audience question how much life is really worth. How much am I like Mother Courage? What would I change or do differently? The play teaches lessons about society, economy, and so forth. All right, that's the thing. That's what the play was about. Okay, so breaking the fourth wall. Now, breaking the fourth wall. This is a Brechtian thing, and we do it all the time. Okay, that's what we did. We did do Rome Sweet Rome. I get you to do it regularly when we do plays. Okay, because we do a combination of elements. The fourth wall is an imaginary wall separating the audience from the action of the stage. In realistic productions, this wall remains intact, and the performers do not acknowledge that they are being watched. So there's your fourth wall there. Here's our stage. There's our fourth wall, the proscenium arch, and the audience is on this side. We're on this side, and generally if we do a realistic play, we don't really care much about them. You guys haven't done a realistic play ever, so you've not really ever been down that road. And you probably won't because your audiences don't pay for one. They simply won't turn up. So we tend to not do them. But having said that, who knows what will happen next year. The audience are observers who are conditioned to believe that the world of the play is real. That's what we said. It's a suspension of disbelief. We've said that. Like most theatres of realism, Brecht wanted to disrupt the notion of the fourth wall. Breaking the fourth wall involves the characters and directly addressing and acknowledging the audience. So presentational theatre. That's what Brecht was all about. Okay. Well, blah, blah, blah. It is made... breaking the fourth wall, where they break character form with awareness of being watched. It is made clear that the characters and the actions are not real and the audience are aware that they are witnessing fiction. That's important, okay? That's really important. All right, so the theory behind this technique links back to the definition of epic theatre. By making away the fourth wall, the audience must face action, make decisions, and have the opportunity to be aroused to action. So that's what epic theatre is. So no real sets, everything's non-realistic, all right? It's done episodic. No emotion. Right, that's what this is all about. Acting techniques, and this is the thing that we've been trying to get you guys to do last week. Brecht believed that an actor should present the character in a way that wasn't an impersonation, rather a narration of actions of the character. Remember I tried to get you guys to show the character as opposed to acting the character. And I get you to show the character by exaggerating the character. Okay? Some of us did it all right. Other of us kind of slip back into what we normally know, you know, because we're comfortable performing like that, you know, but it is a technique, all right, this whole exaggeration, it's showing the character, very different. Right, he did that because he wanted to constantly remind the audience that they were watching a play. He also believed that if the audience developed an emotional attachment to characters, even they could not evaluate the social realities of the play. We've been going down that road. If there's too much emotion, audience gets attached to a character, they won't sit there and be observer, they'll actually start being involved, and we don't want them to be involved, so that's what it's all about. Brecht did not want this to happen. He wanted the audience to question, make comment, and we've talked about that. The Brechtian theatre does not show the human nature of an individual, but reveals collective human relations. So we're all about what's going on stage, not about what's going on with the person. All right? The story is a sequence of events. We've done all that. If the audience does not maintain a distance, we've done that. Acting in epic theatre means an actor is required to play characters believably without convincing either the audience or themselves that they are indeed the characters. Hard thing to do. You guys aren't really used to that. You guys are used to becoming the character. That's what we ask from you. Always, because that's the type of theatre that we do. So if you're asked not to do that, don't become the character. Show the character. Very difficult thing for an actor to do. In fact, actors have always struggled with this. They just do. They just struggle with it. Even actors like Meryl Streep did a production of Mother Courage recently. And Meryl Streep is an excellent actress. We would say she's probably one of the better actresses of our time. She works on Broadway and she works in film, and she's quite good. She struggled with it. She played Mother Courage. She struggled with that whole playing Mother Courage as a cold-hearted, woman. She just struggled with that because that's a very difficult thing for actors to do, to remove themselves. And even though that's something that they have to do as part of epic theatre, it's something that they struggle with. And you guys will struggle with it. I mean, epic theatre didn't really work. It just didn't work. They did some plays, and sure, the stuff was there. So people did question certain things, and they did ask questions. They did say, oh yeah, why is this person like that? How can this person behave? But the reality is, nobody walked out that door and actually decided that they would do something about things. Because people are people. You can't show them one type of theatre all their lives and all of a sudden come up with a new style of theatre and expect an audience to go, yes, I am going to change, I'm going to do something. You can't expect that because it's not in them. They haven't been educated that way. So epic theatre failed in some respects. Other respects, like, the idea, the techniques, the structure, and all that sort of stuff, that lives on today and it's become quite useful. Right, now, when we talk about epic theatre, we talk about gestus. Now, gestus is all about action on stage. Now, it's all about giving some kind of social meaning to an action. So it's not just about doing an action. So, for example, it's a theatrical technique that helps define emotion within a character and the context that they are in the combination of gesture and a social meaning into one movement, social or vocal display. So you can't just do something on stage. There has to be a reason why you're doing something on stage. Okay? You can't just go and pick something up off the ground. There has to be a reason why you pick. There has to be, in a Brechtian performance, there has to be a reason why you're picking that thing off the ground. There's got to be some social meaning attached to it. All right? That's really important difference between epic theatre and dramatic. It is sometimes referred to as a social jest. That's why they call it gestus. As it is an action that allows the audience to understand something specific about the social circumstances presented on stage. All right? And I'll make it really easy for you. If you're walking past a hobo and you throw money on the ground. Now, if we look at the action of the hobo picking money off the ground and putting it in his hat on its own, without you being there, that's fine, because it's a hobo who's picking up money off the ground. It's got no money. Fair enough. However, if you're in the scene and you've got a smirk on your face when the hobo picks up the money, that's a social jest, because that says there's social meaning attached to it. You're looking down upon this person. You are the more powerful person. Your status in society is more important. Therefore, what you're doing has social significance. All right? You get the general idea? All right. Similarly, if someone else throws the coin on the ground, they're standing in the corner, you pick it up, you're well dressed and you give it to the hobo, that's social meaning again. It's just a different type of social meaning, but it's still a social jest. All right? All right. That's as simple as I can make it for you. And then, for example, if a man was eating a sandwich and a dog suddenly attacked him and tried to take the food while the man tried to push the dog away, this would not be a gestus. The act of pushing the dog away becomes a gestus when social meaning is added to the picture. For example, the man is a servant in a castle and the dog belongs to the guards at the gate, and they've let the dog out knowing that he will attack the man. And they are standing at the side laughing at him. That's a social meaning. All right? Now the action pushing the dog away the audience becomes a gesture. So this is an action that holds social meaning. The audience knows that it's not just any man. This is a working class man who's being picked on by people with a little bit more power than him. So that's social meaning. So that's the difference in epic theatre, because we're instructing the audience. So everything's got to have a meaning. The most famous example of this is Mother Courage and Children. Mother Courage shows her inner emotional turmoil, not through words, but through a physical presentation. She looks at the audience and delivers a silent scream. Again, it is not the action alone that makes it justice, but rather the combination of this action and social meaning. Mother Courage has just lost a son, but if she makes any sound or recognition towards him, she will put her life and the life of her daughter in danger. And this is because he's seen as a traitor. So she can't openly acknowledge his death, and she can't say anything about it, so she has a silent scream. So that action on stage has social meaning. Now she represents any person who has had to keep quiet in order to save somebody else. So we get that? Right? Okay, she's being forced into a terrible situation. The audience gets to see this through a just of silent scream. We even see that in dramatic films where, someone's torturing someone, says, you've got to give up the information. If you don't, these people are going to die, and this person says nothing. That's where it all comes from. Theatre doesn't just come out of nowhere. Theatre actually has an origin. And this is where things like that have an origin, even in modern-day theatre and modern-day films. Social media. All right, narration and song. Now, we've done narration and song. We've done all that. I'm not really going to go through that because we've done banners. We've held up banners. We did that last week. You held up your signs. We've asked you to reveal secrets to an audience. We've asked you to sing. All those sorts of things. This has all been done. You've actually done, last week, you had your first real crack at epic theatre. Okay, so you have done it. So all this sheet is a way of crystallising and sort of putting into some kind of knowledge base for you guys what epic theatre is. Just going to pause this.